All right, good morning, everybody. I literally had a message for today, and while the music was on, God says, "Nope, we're going to do this." So I'm going to change up a little bit here. We all know the story of David and Goliath, right? We've heard that since we was kids. David and Goliath. Nobody else would fight the giant, but David did. So I'm going to kind of read over that a little bit because what I want to talk to you today about, and this is why God gave me this particular thing. I preach over and over again that you got to have faith in God, you got to trust God, and you got to believe in God. Well, the story of David and Goliath is perfect to what I've been telling everybody. If you read the story, it's in 1 Samuel's, and you go to chapter 17 to start out with. This is where you find the story of David and Goliath. We all have friend, maybe 2 friends, maybe even 3 friends that absolutely got no confidence in themselves. They're afraid to try something because it'll fail. They're afraid to approach people or to talk to people because they might get turned down, might get turned away. They pray when they need something, but they don't ever believe it's going to happen. See, that's a lack. That's a lack of. But if you are a son or daughter of God, there should be no lacking of confidence, of belief, or of trust. Because the Bible tells you, God tells you, where you are weak, he is strong. Okay? Where you got doubt, God's got positivity. So God can take, if you let him, he can take that doubt and that unsurance and that lack of confidence and do the same thing he did with David. Now, when you read the story of David, you know David was a shepherd. He was the youngest of his family. He was a shepherd. He looked out for sheep. Now, back in them days, they didn't have rifles. They didn't have guns. And most of them carried a sling. A slingshot's what we call today a slingshot. But it was a sling back in them days. Okay? But when the army was facing the Philistines had a giant. Okay? Now, us nowadays, when we think of giants, we think of Godzilla, King Kong, stuff like that. That's what we see as giants, 20 stories tall. All right? But back in them days, you got to remember, most of you Jewish people was only 5 foot something. 5'6", 5'5", something like that. So a giant back in them days could be somebody who was 7 foot tall. All right? But either way, none of Saul's army, the king at that time, Saul, none of his army wanted to fight that big guy. They was afraid of him. Now remember, this is supposed to be an army of God. God's army. And they was all afraid. They all didn't want to step out. It got so bad with their fear that Saul, the king, offered a lot of money for somebody to take him out. And they still wouldn't do it. Okay? So David one day comes from being a shepherd, bringing food to his older brothers, and he starts hearing all that army talking about how they's afraid of that big giant, about how nobody's going to go out and face him. And David just perfectly said, called the Philistine an uncircumcised man and wanted to know why they was afraid of him. So I'm going to read a little bit of this, and starting with 31. So it'd be Samuel, 1 Samuel 17, verse 31. And when the words were heard, which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent him. And David said unto Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. The servant will go and fight the Philistine. So this is David telling the king, I'll go take him. I'll go fight him. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against the Philistine, to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. So the king, right off top, Saul right off the top, doubted David could do it. Okay, so there is no confidence in David. No confidence. You're just a kid. All right, this is a big giant you're going to go up against. There's no way. You don't have no wartime under you. You don't know how to fight. Okay? And this is David's answer to him. And David said unto him, Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep. And there came a lion and a bear, and I took a lamb out of the flock. And when I went after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth, and when I arose again against me, I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him. Okay, so this is David showing. Now you got to catch this when we're reading this. You got to catch this. This is David telling the king, I don't go by what you say. Okay, remember, he's a youth. He's a young guy. And he's telling Saul, I don't go by what you say. When I was out in the field, I killed a lion all by myself and I killed a bear all by myself. But I need you to catch something here. As I'm reading on, I need you to catch something. So he told him he did that. And he delivered him. Thou servant slew both the lion and the bear, and the uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he has defied the army of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord has delivered me out of the paws of the lion and out of the paws of the bear. Did you catch it? Did you catch it? David is not using his confidence. David is not relying on his strength, his knowledge, his wisdom. Because David just said it right here. Through God, I did it. Right? So this shows you how much confidence that David has in God. Because David said, if I can kill a lion and I can kill a bear, well, that giant ain't no problem. Because God has delivered me out of them two, he'll deliver me out of this one. See? So David ain't going by his youth strength or knowledge of war or anything like that. He's going off of what God tells him. And this is what we got to understand. Where we lack confidence in something, God will give you confidence to do that. Right? Think of something that you've never tried before because you're afraid of the outcome of it. Right? When I was a kid, I had no confidence. And I didn't have any because when I was a young tot, I wasn't allowed to do nothing. My asthma was so bad that the doctors told my mom to make me sit down, don't let me do nothing. All right, so I didn't do anything to gain any confidence. All I did was watch TV. Back at my house when I was a kid, you didn't need a TV guy. Just ask me what was on TV. I can tell you. I can tell you every channel, what was coming on at what time. I didn't even tell you what episode it was because that's all I was allowed to do was watch TV. So I didn't go out there. I didn't get to go out there and play and try different things and so on and so forth. All right. But as I got older, it got better. But David wasn't putting his confidence in himself. He wasn't putting that confidence in that slingshot he had. He was putting his confidence in that the Lord was going to keep him safe no matter what. All right? We don't do that. Now here, this church we do. We go through trials and tribulations and we trust God. Now there's sometimes it gets pretty heavy. And sometimes we're like, Lord, are you there? Are you there? So if you keep reading on, you'll see that Saul finally says, okay, David, do it. Go out there. All right? Saul was expecting David to get killed. Let's be honest. He was expecting it. So he tried to give him armor and a sword. Now this is how much confidence that David had in God. David said, I don't need all this stuff. So David went out there with nothing but a slingshot. Something he was familiar with. Something that he knew God would anoint and bless it. So he went out there, as we all know. He went out there. The big giant was making fun of him, calling him a boy, so on and so forth. Okay, now here, this is life. How many times when you go to try to face something or try to do something, somebody tries to talk you out of it? You're all pumped up and ready to go, and then suddenly somebody says, well, you can't do that. That's the end of it. That's the end of it. You don't do it. You let somebody talk you out of it. Right? David didn't do that. David said, I don't need your sword. I don't need your headgear. I don't need your chest plates. I don't need any of that. Why? Because God told him, go kill that giant. He knew he could do it through God. Right? So if you go and read the story, David went out and faced him. The Philistine, the giant, being so much into himself, because he was bigger than them, he took his headgear off. And he started taunting David. And David told him, this day you will die. Of course, the big giant looked at that little guy and was like, oh, okay, whatever. Well, what's David do? He pulls out a rock. He slings it. He hits the giant right between the eyes. Giant falls. Well, David knew that rock wouldn't kill him, but it would definitely knock him out for a while. Because if you read on, David then went to the giant, stood on top of him, pulled out his own sword, and cut the giant's head off. All right. After that, the rest of the Philistine army got scared and took off running. And then suddenly the brave king and all his men went and chased them. Okay? So the point of this story is, which you lack in confidence, which you lacked in strength, which you lacked in belief, God gives that to you. So if you want to try something, especially out there, people that's watching, if you want to try something, let's say, for instance, you're in a church that you go to, and God's put it in your heart to sing a song. But you're shy, bashful, don't think you can sing. Maybe you do sing off key, whatever the case may be. But that fear stops you from doing it. So you don't do it, you don't do it, you don't do it. And then finally, God says to you one day, didn't I tell you to do a song? Go do the song. Now let me tell you something. When God tells you to do something, He's already made the way. There's no reason for you to be feared. There's no reason for you to have doubt, be unconfident. Because if God tells you to do something, He's already prepared you to do it. So maybe you do sing off the key, but that day you won't. Or maybe God's telling you to go talk to somebody, but you're afraid because you got a lack of words. I don't know what to say to him, Lord. What am I supposed to say to him? I don't know what to say. Well, shut up. And God will give you the words to say. We know it. Here in this church, we know it, and a bunch of other churches probably know it too. We're in the end times. I mean, just look what's going on. We're in the end times. All right? Now is not a time to be afraid. Now is the time that you trust God 100%. Now is the time that you believe in God. Don't worry about your personal self. If you're a child of God, guess what? You have the Holy Spirit living in you. Now, please tell me one thing the Holy Spirit can't do. Ain't nothing, is there? The Holy Spirit can do everything. So if it's your turn to do something, if God says, hello, do it. Do it. Don't worry about it. God's already been there. God's already made the way. You know, we don't talk to a lot of people because we're afraid of that person. For instance, if you walked up to a 6'7" biker with more tattoos than Carter's got liver pills, with his leather on, and he looks just about as mean can get, you're going to hesitate going up talking to that guy. Most people will. It's fear. And God says, I did not give you the spirit of fear. That comes from Satan or your mind. All right, so now you got to go up and talk to that big 6-foot guy. And you got to tell him exactly what the Lord told you to tell him. Now, trust me, I've talked to some people I was kind of leery about. But then I just met, no, God's already been there. Yeah, it might be scary at first, but when you get up there and talk to that guy, he might be the most pleasant guy in the world. He just might like to ride motorcycles, and that's why he looks that way. Okay? Confidence is not something you build up. Either you got it or you don't got it. But the wonderful thing about it is if you don't got it, you can ask God for it. And God will give it to you. I mean, He gives me confidence all the time. There's a lot of stuff at work I don't know how to do, but I got to do. You know, new presses that come up I've never ran before. And they tell you these parts has got to be perfect. I've never done them. So I'll just go up, I'll watch them. And as I'm watching them, God's building my confidence up to it. Then when it's my turn to give him a break, I'm doing it. Okay? If you got low trust in God, build that trust up. Because let me tell you something. Every time God does something for you, that is to build your confidence in God. That is to build your faith. That's to build your belief. So every time God answers a prayer, He's building your confidence in Him. But a lot of people don't see that because a lot of people see God as Santa Claus. I ask, He gives, everything's good. Oh. Every time you fail something, you didn't fail it. Okay, yeah, it didn't happen the way you wanted to, but it's not a fail. It's a lesson. All right? Okay, I didn't do it this time. Why? Why didn't I do it? That's the way you should be looking at it. All right, Lord, why didn't I do it this time? And then God will tell you. A lot of times we fight battles and we fight them the wrong way. We're not using the weapon we should be using. But you ask God, He tells you what weapon to use. He does that to me before. More than once. Then you got other people that is way too confident. They think they can do everything, and even though they fail, they still keep that confidence. But some of them get, I think the word we use nowadays is too cocky. Okay, I can do everything. They're the best in the world at everything, and so on and so forth.
Too cocky for your own good.
Yeah, too cocky for their own good. There's a lot of people out there like that, and if you know, then people fail a lot. Because when you start thinking that you're better than God, you got issues. You got major issues. And if you stop and think about it, and the 12 disciples will prove this, God don't use the overconfident. God don't use the educated. God don't use the geniuses. 12 disciples will show you that. He uses people he knows he can teach. He uses people that he knows will do things his way. Now let's keep something in mind here. God's will for each and every one of us, it says in the Bible, over and over again, his will for each and every one of his children is to be a servant. To do what Jesus did when he was on earth, but do it better. Okay? It's his will that we prosper. How do we prosper? We do what Jesus says. We do what God tells us. Okay? In order to do that, we got to put all of our trust and belief and faith in God. Because if not, it won't happen. I believe I told this story before, and I know somebody on the video is going to say, what's that got to do with anything? But I'll tell you. Long time ago, back when I was just a youngin', always wanted to sing like Elvis. Because back in them days, Elvis was a big thing. So I always wanted to sing like him. And I said, Lord, just one day let me sound like Elvis. Well, back when I was in my 20s, I was doing karaoke. And played an Elvis song. That's when God answered my prayer. Because I kept in faith that one day God was going to do it. All that time I kept in faith one day God was going to do it. But when I got that mic in my hand, I was staying up on stage. I went totally black. Just like I passed out on stage or something. I don't know what happened. All I know is the song started and my eyes woke up when the song was done. So I don't know what happened between there. I was still standing, still had the mic in my hand. Don't know what happened. All right. When it was over with, I was confused. I know I went to the stage, but I don't know what happened when I was on the stage. All I know is when the song was over, my eyes woke up and I looked at everybody and I was like, well, I went back, sat at my table, and one of the ladies there, she goes, man, you sounded just like Elvis. And I was like, oh, God granted my wish. Okay. But the thing was, is I always kept confident that God was going to let me do that one day. And this was like 10 years later. Okay. But I always had trust. I always believed that God would do what I ask if it's in his will. See, a lot of prayers don't get answered because it's not God's will. Because everybody prays, Lord, make me a millionaire, make me a millionaire. Well, God knows what you're going to do with that money. It's not in his will for you to have it. Okay? But we got to trust. We got to keep trusting God like we never had before, especially nowadays. Look at the prices of everything. But you know what's wonderful? In this church, and I'm sure other churches too, none of us are starving to death. Even though prices are up. Right? Gas prices are up. We still make the church. We still go to work. Okay? That's not your paycheck, people. That's not your paycheck. Crystal can definitely identify what it is. It's not your paycheck. It's God. You know? You got them days when you get your paycheck and you got a little extra money left over. Right? And then all of a sudden your car breaks down or something like that. I've heard 1,000 people tell me this. That's come every time I got extra money over, something happens. And God pointed this out to me driving home one day from work. I was coming home from work. God says, you know, you've heard people say all the time that every time they get extra money, something happens and they got to use that money towards that. I said, yeah, Lord, I've heard a lot of people. I said, I've said that before. He goes, have they ever stopped and think that I gave them that extra money because I knew it was going to happen? And you don't trust God? You don't believe in God? You don't have enough faith in God? He shows you every day that he's there in some way or another. But right now in this time, it's hard, but it's not real hard. I mean, like I said, you got a place to live, you got food, you're able to go to work, you're still living. That should show you that God's there for you. Now, I get it in different countries. It's probably a lot worse than it is here. You know, I mean, we got to be honest. America is bad, but it's not that bad. But Philippines, Africa, and places like that, they don't have the money and stuff like that for that. All right? But God's still there. As long as they keep their trust in God, their faith in God, he'll be there. Low self-esteem is from Satan. Low confidence is from Satan. I don't know how many times Satan told me I couldn't do something. And he does that through your thoughts. When you go to try to do it, or you'll use somebody. When you go to do it, all of a sudden you hear, you can't do that. You can't do that. And you don't try it.
Or he's using somebody else to tell you.
Or he's using someone else to tell you. And it's usually, and I don't know why, but it's most generally your family. Your brother, sister, or mom and dad says, you can't do that.
Watch me.
Exactly. And that's the attitude you should have. Watch me. Just like David did. David was not afraid to go out in front of that giant because David knew God was with him. David knew he was going to win.
I've had that down at work. Someone, I'll be getting ready to do something, they'll be like, you can't do that. And I just turn and look at them and go, watch me.
Yeah, because your faith is in God.
And I go do it. They're like, I can't believe you did that. Well,
Your faith is in God. It's not in anybody else. If you hold your faith, you hold your confidence, and you hold your self-esteem to what other people says, you ain't going nowhere. But if you hold that to what God says, you're going everywhere. You're going everywhere. When I first became a preacher, my thought was, I don't know the Bible well enough to do services. You know, because I'll be honest, before I became a pastor, I didn't read that Bible a whole lot. But luckily, I had a good teacher. And luckily, Pastor Jack helped me get the confidence to do it. Now, I was never afraid to go in front of people. Never. I've never been camera shy or anything like that. You know, God made me that way. I get up in front of people, sing. I get up in front of people, talk, tell jokes, the whole 9 yards. I don't care. I'm good with that. Because that's what God made me to do. All right? But we got to put our trust. We got to put our faith. We got to put everything in every ounce in our body to trust and have faith in God. And if we do, like David, we can take out the giants. You know, and yeah, I can honestly say this. Before I became a preacher, I had doubts about a lot of things. A lot of things I didn't try, a lot of things I didn't do, so on and so forth. But it was just like when I become a preacher, that just changed. Now, I've been doing this for 13 years. And let me tell you something. If you've been a pastor that long and you don't get your messages through the mail, okay? Because a lot of them do. There's different religions out there that gets their messages for the month through the mail. All right, so they know what they're going to be preaching on. Okay, but if you don't do that, if you're trusting God for your messages, after 13 years, you kind of run out of stuff to preach on. Actually, after 10 years, you start running out of stuff to preach on. Okay, but that's where you, as a preacher, teacher, pastor, whatever the case may be, this is where you got to trust God. Because I ask God on Fridays, every Friday, what am I preaching on Sunday? And then Saturday comes up, okay, Lord, what am I preaching on tomorrow? Okay. And then I had a service for today. This is how God works. I had a service for today, and God says, no, we're going to talk about this. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what confidence? What do you want to talk about confidence for? He said, because there's too many people out there that ain't got it. And they need to know that the confidence don't have to be in themselves. It has to be into me. So if you're afraid to do something, pray to God before you go, and then go. Go do it. Because God's going to be there. You remember, it says that God knew you before you was even in the womb. And that he made a path for you once you was born. I guess people nowadays would call that a destination. All right? He already had that all planned out for you. I never ever thought I was going to be a preacher. Never. That was the furthest thing from my mind. To me, and it still is, I'm just not doing it so much, my calling was music. All right? I'm supposed to be playing the guitar and singing. All right? So I never ever thought of I was going to be a teacher or a preacher. But I am. That was the destination, one of the destinations God's had for me. Okay? So confidence don't come from you. It don't come from the inside. It comes from God. And if God tells you to go do something, go. He's already there. He's already been there. He's already talked to that person before you talk to him. So when you get there, even though it may seem scary, after the first few words, you're just going to relax. Because you're going to realize you're not there by yourself. So don't be afraid to sing that song at church. Don't be afraid to read scriptures if God tells you to read scripture. Don't be afraid to go up and talk to somebody if God says go up and talk to them. The confidence is not in you, it's in God. And he'll take care of it. He'll make it the way it's supposed to be. Doubt comes from Satan. God never gave you the spirit of doubt either. Because think this. If we are made in the image and the likeness of God, what does that make you? All powerful. It makes you to where your confidence level should be up here. You shouldn't be afraid of nothing. You should be worried about nothing. You should, when Satan tries to do something, care less about it. Because I tell him all the time, if that's the best you got, go back to hell where you belong. Okay? I'm not worried. I'm not worried about him. I'm not worried about what he does. Why? Because I know I got God fighting for me. I know Jesus is up there going, Lucifer, Okay? Will God allow you to go through trials and tribulation? Sure. Why? Because it builds your faith. Gives you more confidence in him. So he'll let things happen. He don't do them, but he'll let it happen, just like Job. That's a prime example of what we try to teach people, but they don't understand. But Job's is perfect. Satan confronted Jesus and said, what about Job? You got a protection around him. If you take that protection away, he'll fold and curse you. And what did Jesus say to him? Do whatever you want, but just don't kill him. Okay? So even though Jesus let that happen to Job, all right, he's proven his point. And after it was all said and done, Job got all his animals back. He got everything back. He didn't get his kids back, unfortunately, but he got everything back. Why? Because no matter what happened to Job, Job always still believed in God, always still had confidence in God, and always kept his faith. And that's what we're supposed to do. David did the same thing. Yeah, he might have been a giant, but he wasn't worried about it. Why? Because he knew God had his back. And that's the way we got to be. You know, you read some of these stories in here of the different people, Job, David, and all them, and you think to yourself, man, how did they do that? I mean, let's face it. Look at Jonah. He got swallowed by a giant fish. That's scary, people. That's scary. That's scary. You're out breathing in the world, and all of a sudden you're in a big fish belly. That's scary. But even him, once that happened to him, he realized you got to do what God says. Right? But if you read these, I don't know about you guys, but I'll read some of these stories and I'll be like, God, why don't that happen nowadays? And then God will bring somebody to memory. Oh, that still is happening. Miracles. When you read this Bible, man, miracle after miracle after miracle. Matthew's and John just talked about miracles all over the place. And Lord, how come that's not happening nowadays? And Mom, before she passed away, she asked God that. She said, Lord, how come you don't do miracles anymore like you used to? And God told her, he said, I gave you doctors. So I don't have to do miracles. He said, but in other countries, they're still happening. Africa, Philippines, places that don't have doctors. God's still doing miracles. But he's still doing them here in America too. It just may not be the same kind of miracles that we want to see. You know, Mom always said, right up till the day she died, she wanted God to do a miracle for, what was his name? Is it Christopher Reeves? Is he the one that used to play Superman? Christopher Reeves ended up was on a horse and got thrown and got paralyzed. I think it was Christopher Reeve. Well, Mom, before she died, she wanted to see a miracle. She just wanted to see that. And the only thing she wanted to see was that man to get up and walk again. That's why she kept asking God, Lord, get him up walking again. I don't know why, but for some odd reason, she was fixed on that. Now, to this day, I don't even know if he's still alive or not. I got no idea. But Mom was holding faith that that would happen. Of course, she passed, so now if it doesn't happen, she wouldn't know it. But that's the kind of faith we got to keep. If we don't see it right away, keep that faith. You know? If we don't notice it coming up, keep that faith. If we think God ain't listening to you, keep that faith. Keep that trust. Because I guarantee you, when you're least expecting it, it's going to get done. Because God works suddenly. 1 minute there's nothing, then suddenly there it is. That's how God works. Remember, the Bible says, God tells you in the Bible, it's his timing, not ours. Because if it was come by our timing, we want it right now. We don't want to wait tomorrow. We don't want to wait 2 hours. We don't want to wait a half hour. We want it right now. Now think about it. If you got everything you ever wanted right now, what would you need God for anymore? Okay? That's why it's his timing. Because he's building your faith. He's building your trust. Just like he did on David. Think about it. If you're a youth, so we got to say youth, our youth nowadays would be anybody in their teens. Right? Anybody under 21 would be youth. Of course, at my age, everybody's youth. But let's go by standards here. Okay? So you got to figure he probably was 20 years old or younger. But he had so much faith in God that he didn't have no problem stepping out there in front of that giant. And that's where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to have so much confidence in God, we don't care what it is. My son asked me one day, he said, Dad, the way this world's going, when should I be worried? I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, all this stuff is going on, all this bad stuff's going on. At what point should people start worrying?
Should.
And I just put it to him simply. I said, I'll tell you what, Joe. I said, I'll tell you when it's time for you to start worrying. He said, when? I said, when I start worrying. When I start worrying, you start worrying. He goes, well, that makes sense, Dad. Because I don't worry. Stop and think about it. What's the worst possible thing that could happen to you? You get killed. That's not bad. Guess where you're going? You're going to heaven. That's not a bad thing. Kill me. I'll go home. Okay? And anything that happens to you bodily wise, God will take care of. You know how many crippled people's walking now? That they said would never walk again? That's not due to medicine people, that's due to God. But you got to have enough faith in God and enough confidence in God to get that done. That's why God's always trying to constantly build it for you. He does this, he does that to get you to trust him a little bit more and more and more. Okay, I get to the point now. Was it 2 or 3 months ago? I was worried about the electric getting shut off. And I told everybody, God will get it done. God will pay it. Hey, we still got lights. You got to put your trust in God. And like I said, God works suddenly. So it might be right when that bill's due that you get it, but he'll do it. Okay, so confidence is not something you build up. Confidence is something God gives you. And God didn't give you a spirit of fear. So you should not fear nothing. Just like David did. He didn't fear that giant. He knew God was going to take him out. God will use us to do things that's scary. He will have us to do things that in our mind is scary. All right? But if God tells you to do it, he's already there. Now, be honest with yourselves. Be honest with yourselves. How many people would go weed eat at a cemetery at midnight? Yeah, I ain't going there, are you, right? Why? Why? A lot of people won't do that because it's a cemetery, dead people, right? And they're afraid that they might run into a ghost. Okay? They're dead. I ain't never seen a dead person get up out of the grave and go, boo, I got you. Never seen that.
It's not the dead you got to worry about, it's the living.
It's the living you got to worry about, not the dead. But a lot of people won't do that just because it's a cemetery. Ah. All right, that's fear. God didn't give you that fear. You should go get your weed eater and get started. But a lot of people won't do it. A lot of people won't talk to a homeless person. When you was kids in school, I've seen this a lot. When you was a kid in school, and one of them kids might have had some kind of a disease, cancer or something like that, a lot of people wouldn't be friends with that kid because of that. Because they was afraid they would get it. Or because that person didn't look like everybody else. Normal. They wouldn't talk to that kid. And it's happening in adults. A lot of people won't go talk to a homeless person just because they're homeless. But they still got a heart. God still loves them. You know, a lot of churches won't talk to homosexuality people because of what they are. Well, let's remember what the Bible says.
They're the ones that you should be talking to.
They're the ones you should be talking to.
Very
Exactly.
important.
And the Bible states it. Hate the sin, not the sinner. So you may not like what they're doing, but if you don't go tell them that it's wrong, they never know it. Of course, they always come up with the same argument. Well, love is love. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Love ain't love. I had a lady that used to go to this church here just a couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago, said, well, love is love. And I said, no, it's not.
There's
Love ain't
there's
love.
lust.
There's love and there's lust. But there's different kinds of love. Okay? There's different types of love. There's a brother and sister love. There's a love of parents. The parents love you. There's friends that you love. We all walk out of here every day, every Sunday and say, love you. Okay? There's different types of love. It's not love is love. No, it's not. But as you said, most of the love is lust. There's a difference. Okay? But we got to be like David. We got to be like David. David was scared of nothing. David was worried about nothing. In fact, God said David was a man after his own heart. And I questioned God about that before too. I said, Lord, tell me what you mean by that. What do you mean David was a man after your own heart? I still ain't got the answer yet, but I'm waiting on it. But that's how much confidence David had in God. He was not afraid of nothing. Nothing worried him. Even when God took his son, that he shouldn't have did. Even when God took his son, didn't let his son be born. David still had the confidence on God. Still wasn't afraid. But we as humans, nowadays, if something bad happens to us, what's the first thing we do? Blame God. And half the time when somebody dies, it's not God's fault. Well, none of it's God's fault because God don't kill people. He tells you that right there. I won't kill anybody. Okay? We got to stop doing that. We got to have the confidence of David. We got to know that no matter what we face, no matter what it is, God's going to be there. And God's going to have our backs. God proved that to me one day when we was talking. I've told you this story before, but I like it. I was in bed, getting ready to go to sleep. I started talking to God, and all of a sudden football came up. Why we're talking about football, I don't know, but we are. And I said, yeah, Lord. I said, I'll hike the ball. You can throw the ball to Jesus and we'll get a touchdown. He said, no. He said, I'm going to hike the ball. He said, let anybody try to get by me. Okay? That was God's way of saying, I'll go to the front line for you. And I dare him try to get by me. All right? And ever since he told me that, I was like, okay. Come at me. I dare you. All right? I got God on my side. All right? So when God told me that, that built my confidence up big time. I was like, all right. God's got me. God's got me. And that's where we got to be. We got to quit worrying about the small stuff. We got to quit worrying about the big stuff. We got to quit making mountains out of molehills. We just got to trust God. Put every bit of confidence you got in God. Because God will not let you down. He will not let you down. He may not give you what you want, but he will definitely give you what you need. Will God do want sometime? Yes, he did to me. Sometimes he will give you a want. But most of the time it's what you need. So get your confidence up. Trust God with all your heart. Have faith in God no matter what it is. It makes life a lot easier. A lot easier. When you know that you ain't got to worry about nothing, that whatever comes up, you can just simply say, Lord, this is yours. I can't deal with it. I don't want it. It's yours. And it gets done with a lot quicker and a lot easier. So if David could do it, we can do it. If David could trust God with all of his heart, we can trust God with all of our heart, with all of our spirit, with all of our soul, with all of our mind. God is number one. We're just here. So let God be God and get rid of your fears. Okay. So may God bless you. May He give you peace and keep a smile on your face.